I don't have a specific quote today from someone else, but it was another small note that I had made that I came across that I wanted to talk about today. And I had written down, we decide what to tell. And what that means, what that's about, is about our history, or history. And I am a historian. I was trained in university as a historian, and I have adopted that set of glasses that I look at everything that happens in the world, especially as it comes up from history. And it's almost impossible for me to not anymore. And I love history not because it's an exercise of memorizing facts and events and things, but because I'm always fascinated by human choices. And that's what history is a catalog of human choices and the legacies from those choices that we are now in the middle of, for better or for worse. But one thing that I came to a conclusion on, and that I wrote some of my final papers on, is that history is not a project of the past. It's actually a project of the present, of us right now, because we are the ones telling the history. We decide what to tell, and how to tell it, and what it means to us. And if you think that history is some static thing that happened the same way for everyone and can be told in the same way for everyone, you're wrong. Because we are always telling new stories that paint a different picture because of who we want and need to be in the present. And for example, in India, in the past, there of course was Great Britain was colonized there, or did for many years. And so the history that was told and got into books that I learned in at school, or whatever, for a while anyway, talked about how a certain event was called there's some other name to it, it doesn't matter, but it was a mutiny. Okay, it was called the mutiny. That was the name of the event, and it happened in such and such a time. And we learned that, one person's mutiny is another person's freedom fight, right? But it was a mutiny because the history came from Britain and from the colonial narrative. There's actually something called the colonial narrative. Maybe I'll do a whole video on that, or a whole series on that. But it means that the people who have been colonizing are the ones telling the stories. And so the way that they're looking at things, and the way that they would describe things, and the meaning that they would give to things comes from them. Now again, is this bad? I don't know. It just is what it is. It comes from where it comes from. But if a captain in the British Army was not writing the story, and someone who was in the pretty much enslaved Indian Army for the Britons, if they were writing the story, some average Indian gentleman who found himself conscripted into the British Army with very little choice, what would he call it? He wouldn't call it a mutiny. So the point is yes, the event happened, but the things we tell about it and the history that it makes is something different from everyone's point of view. And, we can see this also with the colonization of the United States with we talk a lot about, Columbus and the Pilgrims was the next story or something, and then so on and so forth. And then for several decades, there's been a recovery of the other voices, like the native voices, the indigenous voices. What's their history of what happened? Or women are missing from histories. What is their voices of what happened? My point is, in this video, again, is not whether what's good or what's bad. It's just that, again, we are the ones telling the history. We decide what's important to us. At first, maybe that stuff wasn't important to the people who were writing history, and then it became important because new people were born that wanted to tell a different history and needed to. I like it. I like where we're going with our history. But our history's in the present because it's about us and how we want to tell who we are. This idea and reality is one of the most important things that we need to take care of as we move toward world peace. In order to have a different present and a different future, we have to start with telling a different story of the past that allows for the peace. And it doesn't mean we have to gloss over things that took place. In fact, it'd probably be better if we didn't. If we stopped glossing over anything, If we brought all the ugly out into the air, that might be helpful. But how we decide to talk about who we were and who we became. I'm even going to go so far, for example, and it's difficult for me to talk about this because I'm from the outside looking in, so there's only so much I can say about this, but the conflicts that have taken place, for example, in Palestine between Israelis and Palestinians, and again, not saying what any solutions should be, but if there's going to be any peace, if there would be any peace, there has to be a way to tell the past in a different way, as if it was one story instead of two stories. And I just use that as an example. Again, it doesn't necessarily directly impact me, although things that happen there seem to impact the whole world sometimes. Now, I will be undertaking a project of retelling the history of the world. I do that all the time in my mind, and who knows, maybe I won't get strong enough to actually write it down. But I think one of the series that I will be doing on this YouTube, at least eventually, will be to talk about the history the way that I want to talk about it, in a way that would lead from that history into into a different look for the present and into a different look for the future, into world history. And again, my object isn't to gloss over things or have, we're just a merry band of brothers. We have to tell it as real as we can, or as real as I think it is. That rooster wants to be on the video. But still, we tell what happened. Every generation tells, for example, the Holocaust, the way that we talk about the Holocaust. And some people, of course, think that it didn't happen, so they've got a different kind of history. You know what I mean? And so that has consequences, the way that we think about and tell our history. But it's a project for the present. And so to think that we don't change history, we absolutely do, and we need to. We need to change our story of what has happened in the past. And to me, we have to give up a lot of our prides that we've sown into history, and the prides that we are basing our enmity on in the present. And so it's an endless, complicated subject, I think, in some ways, so I'm not going to go much farther, just giving you the forward idea on that. But a new story makes a new people. And if you make a people by having one story, it's both simple and difficult. Because, of course, you can't make anyone tell a story or be a part of a story they don't want to be a part of. But at the same time, to act like there cannot ever be a story told like that, that's also not true. You can make the story, the history that you want to make. You can have it have a meaning, even including the ugly stuff. You can put a meaning on it that is a meaning of reconciliation and of going forward. This is where we were, this is where we are now, this is where we're going. But we're in charge of that. My point is we're in charge of that telling of that history. We decide what to tell. It's not static. It's not the same thing for everyone. And going forward depends on what we've said about our past first. So think about it. It works for world history. It also works for for local Like relationships like with significant others or something. Like if you're trying to repair your relationship with your significant other or something, or repair your relationship with your parents or your children, you have to re-look at the history that you have and put a different meaning and story on even the difficulties that you've had. You have to tell a new history from those things too. So think about it. Your history, your story is going to give you your peace in the present and the future. See ya.